All right, we are really nerding out on this one. If you've watched my video, 30 Days to a Fully Organized Life, or you're coming from my tier systems for beginner video, you're in the right place. If you haven't watched those videos, you might want to start there because in this video, we're going to talk about intermediate to advanced ways for you to live a fully organized life. I'm really excited to get into some of these advanced strategies. Let's start with a quick overview of the TIERS life organization system. The system has 4 components, and the final S is the system that brings all 4 components together. The T is for a task management system, the I is for an inbox system, the E is for an event management system, the R is for some sort of reference system, and then the S brings it all together. Although it is organized this way because there is a nice acronym, everything starts in the I, which is the inbox. So let's talk about some advanced strategies to set up and manage your inbox. I think of life as having 3 distinct inboxes: my email inbox, my actual physical inbox, that's like my mailbox at home, as well as my conversational inbox. This includes conversations that I have with people and conversations that I have with myself. Like my brain spontaneously reminds me like, hey, I need to get my oil change. That counts as a conversation. I deal with each of these inboxes very differently. So let's start with my email inbox. That one is like the bane of my existence. For my email inbox, I think of everything in that inbox as falling into 3 categories. And actually, everything in all of my inboxes fall into like 3, maybe 4 categories. In every email is either a specific task that needs to be transferred over to my task management system, a specific event that needs to be placed in my calendar, my event management system, or it's a reference material, something that I might want to refer to in the future. Now, everything else is garbage, and I'm not afraid to throw out emails. Another thing that you could do is archive those emails in the event that you might want to refer to them later. I think old emails have become a sort of safety blanket where we keep them just in case, but we tend to discount the cost of that in the event that we actually need to search for something. I'd like to search within a much smaller pool by looking at what's in my reference section rather than just dumping everything into archive in the unlikely event that I need it. If you have unlimited memory and you want to do that within like your electronic systems or within your email system, like there's not necessarily a harm in it as long as it's out of the way, because if it is in your inbox, it does have a cognitive cost for you to sort through those things. So I really prefer to just throw things out if I know that I'll never have to see it again. Like, why do I need to know that Macy's had its semi-annual sale 3 years ago on March 15th? I don't need to know that, so I'm going to throw out as much as I possibly can. Now, we're going to talk about what to do when things are in your inbox. We're going to talk about how you handle things within your task management system if they go in there, and how to deal with things in your event management system when we get there. But for now, we have cleared out this email inbox. Your next inbox is your physical inbox. That's things that you get in the mail, things that you get from your job or from your kid's school, things that you actually have like a physical paper copy of. For those things, we're also going to classify them in the same way. If they are a task item, like the HOA is telling you that you need to repaint your front door, that is going to go into my task list, and I'm not going to keep that physical paper copy. Again, unless you actually need to keep that physical copy just in case, ask yourself really critically, is this an anxiety-based decision or is it an evidence-based decision? And if you're wondering, why am I speaking so much about cognitive load and how you feel about things? Hi, my name is Dr. Jamie. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist who has focused on performance optimization for the last 12 years. And here on this YouTube channel, I focus on using psychology and behavioral science to inform the things that we talk about. And since today we're talking about having an organized life, it's really about decreasing the cognitive load, decreasing that little voice of anxiety that many of us have in the back of our minds saying like, are you doing what you should be doing? Did you forget something? something? Are you being like the best mother, husband, worker that you can be? That little voice is coming from a place of uncertainty. And the more that you can trust yourself and trust that you have full visibility on what you need to do, and you're actually focusing your effort and time on what you need to be doing at the time that you're doing it, the more we can quiet that voice. So, back to our mailbox, if we get a specific to do list item in the mail, we can put that in our task management system and hopefully get rid of the actual paper copy. If we do need to keep a paper copy, say you got something like the deed to your house or a replacement social security card, those things actually need to be kept in their physical original form, and those things should be filed away over in your physical reference system. We'll talk more about that as we get there. There are very few things that I get in the mail that require me to file away that actual piece of paper that I have. Most of the time, I'll be getting information that I might want to remember later. So there are some options for how to handle that. You can scan that page in and then put it into your digital reference management system, or you can extract the relevant information and write it out in a separate note that you're also going to be keeping in your digital reference system. I like to do the latter, which is extract the information that I need, rewrite it in my own words, and file that note away within my digital reference system. And that's because engaging with information and actually rewriting it in your own words increases the likelihood that you'll remember that you actually have that piece of information. So I like to do that rather than scanning it in and filing it away. But we actually are doing two things to increase the likelihood that you'll remember that you have this piece of information within your reference system. The first thing is engaging with it in some way, either scanning it or rewriting it. The second way that you're engaging with the information is how you're actually going to be sorting that information, how you're going to be labeling it, and where you're going to be putting it within your reference system. We'll get more into that as we go into references. The other thing you might get in the mail are events, and you take the information from the specific invitation, for example, and you're going to put that into your event management system. And if you don't have any kind of emotional attachment to the invitation, then consider throwing that out in the garbage. The final inbox being communication, things that come from your own communication to yourself, your thoughts, or things that come from other people. When I'm having a conversation with someone, I could be a little annoying because as they're talking to me, I want to make sure that I extract to-do list, reference items, or events from the conversation. Now, I'm not sitting there taking notes unless I'm at work, and then I really am taking notes as you're talking to me. Usually I'll wait to the end of the conversation. I will bring out my little notebook or my phone, and I'll say, all right, so just so that I remember, you want me to come to Jacob's birthday on Saturday the 16th, I'll send you an email for your address. One of the key principles of behavioral science that I'm utilizing here is a thorough understanding of the forgetting curve. The second I walk away from Jacob's mom, I am going to start forgetting the conversation that I had with her and start forgetting the bits and details about what she talked to me about. Was it Jacob's birthday or was it Julie's birthday? Is it next Saturday or is it 2 Saturdays from now? So I want to make sure that I capture it. I'm artificially preserving the memory and not relying on my brain to hold these ideas. It's similar to what the lay person David Allen wrote in his famous Getting Things Done about the mind being for having ideas, not holding ideas. There is some scientific literature behind that. We are going to remember things that are more salient to us, potentially things that are more emotionally charged. But overall, we're talking about just regular life things. I want to write it down as close to the point where I receive that information as possible. And if it pops up in my head when I'm driving or something like that, oh, I need to get my oil change, I want to make sure to write that down somewhere. Make sure that it gets into my digital inbox system. I want to capture any sort of communication that falls into the category of something I need to do, someplace I need to be, or something I might need to remember in the future. How long ago did I spill some soda on myself? How come you didn't tell me? We're gonna march on. That is how your inbox attaches to your task manager, your event manager, and your reference manager. Now, let's go back to the beginning and talk about your task management system. It is vital that you have just one place to collate all of your tasks. Sure, you may have 3 inboxes like we just discussed, but we want to make sure that everything that you have to do is in one place. In order to effectively manage your tasks, you need a bird's eye view of everything that you need to do. From there, our paths might diverge. Depending on the type of job that you have or your life circumstances, you're going to want to treat the items on your task list differently. I'm going to cover 3 different ways of handling your tasks that have worked for me at different parts of my life. Let's start from the easiest to the most complex. If you have the type of life where you have a lot of things going on, right now I have a 9-to-5, I have responsibilities at home, I also have this YouTube channel that I run on the side or in addition to my 9-to-5. So I have a lot of things on my plate and I want to keep them all moving at a consistent pace. So every morning I look at my to-do list and I identify the top thing that I must do in each of these 3 portions of my life. The top thing that I need to do for my 9-to-5 job, the top thing that I need to do for the productivity psychologist, and the one thing that I need to do in my personal life. I take those items and I open up my calendar, my event management system, and I look at when in the day can I actually get those things done. That ensures that the 3 areas of my life continue moving forward and I'm focusing only on the most important thing in each area. Now, if I was independently wealthy and I didn't have the confounds of my 9-to-5, I might use a value-based system. I have used this system in the past when I've had 9-to-5 jobs that weren't as demanding or when I'm in a season of my life where I'm focusing on one thing more than something else. I don't think I've ever had a time in my adult life where all of my life domains, all of my roles and responsibilities were completely balanced, but I have had times where the harmony between the different areas of my life has shifted. There have been times when I had a young son, for example, where he was my main priority and I would be doing a lot of things related to his care. There have been times in my life where I was working really, really hard to get that promotion in my 9-to-5 job. So I've attended to my task list differently depending on the value that I placed on different areas of my life. If that was the case and I was focusing, say, on getting a promotion at my 9-to-5, I might say, what are the top 3 things that I need to do at work? And what is one additional thing that I can get done today outside of work? That type of values-based task selection is not a luxury that a lot of us have, but it is kind of an aspirational goal for me, and I have enjoyed using it in the past. What I have used the most frequently in my adult working life is the Eisenhower decision matrix. I have taken every task that I have at work and at home, and I've put it on a 2x2 matrix where the x-axis is how important it is and the y-axis is how urgent it is. And I tend to use 1 week as a measure of urgency. If it has to be done this week, then that's high urgency. If it could be done next week or after that, it's low urgency. And importance has to do with the amount of value that that individual task is bringing. This is why I usually need to have 2 task lists or 2 matrices. One for my 9-to-5 and then one for my home life, which also includes work on this YouTube channel. And that's because the things that I find important personally might be very different than a project that is of high value to my organization or to my company. So I tend to have 2 separate matrices when I do use this task stratification system, but that added layer of complexity is totally worth it because of how I use these 4 quadrants. Everything in the high importance, high urgency gets a scheduled time in my calendar. So I move it from the task manager over to my event manager. If it's in the high importance, high urgency box, it gets priority for scheduling over everything else. Next comes the high importance, lower urgency tasks. These are tasks that I want to take my time and think through and really have a deep work block to be able to work on it, those get second priority. And if you're doing this right, theoretically, this second priority should have more items than your high urgency, high importance tasks. Because if something is of high importance, it's great if you can take the time to give it the space and attention that it deserves before it's due, right? So I try to keep the amount of things in high importance, high urgency to be like small, and the second one to be larger. It doesn't always work. And I think part of the reason why it doesn't work for me is that what I think is important and what my company thinks is important is often different. Whereas at home in like my personal matrix, there is much less things in high importance and high urgency. Part of that is because of this third and fourth quadrant. So the third quadrant for me are things that are high urgency but low importance. I don't have too many of those in my personal matrix, but I have a bunch of them at work. Things like mandatory training or bosses that want you to respond to their emails immediately. Those things get bumped up in that they need to be addressed this week. So they might be bumped up into high importance, high urgency. And the importance is that like I don't want to get in trouble at work. But the level of like intrinsic importance that I assign to it is very low. So that's how things end up moving from like the third quadrant to the first quadrant, and then the fourth quadrant, low importance, low urgency. Those are things that never get done. Sometimes I'm at a company for like 2 years and things just sit there for the whole time until I move on to a new organization. So stratifying my to-do list this way helps me to plan my day in my event management system, which is the next system that we're going to go in depth in now. All right, let's take a deep dive into your calendar. I've played around with 2 ways of organizing my calendar over the last few years, and both of them have worked out in a variety of circumstances. So the first one is setting up an ideal week, and I do this every quarter. I go through and I know what regular meetings I have at work, what kind of regular responsibilities I'm going to have at home. I do it every quarter because it just works when you have a kid, and every quarter there is like a different sport or a different schedule. So every quarter I go in and I put on all of my recurring tasks. Then I schedule in things related to my big picture goals. So I have a goal about posting on this YouTube channel. So in order to do that, I need to take systematic steps toward posting the YouTube channel. So any kind of reoccurring action that is going to get you closer to your long-term goals, that's the next thing that I put on my calendar. Next, I take a look at any non-negotiables. For some people, that's like a Sunday dinner with their family of origin, going to the gym every day. The 1 or 2 commitments that I think are really non-negotiables in terms of my life satisfaction. That usually leaves, surprisingly, maybe 5 or 6 hours left in your day for putting in things that you need to. Some of those hours are going to be taken up by things that you have to do at work, and some of the hours might be taken up by things that you need to do for your personal life. But once you have this skeleton schedule, you know exactly the time slots that are open for you to plug in all of your individual tasks. This works with any way that you've chosen to prioritize your task list. Another way that I have organized my calendar that has worked at different portions of my life has been to create blocks of time where I engage in certain types of activity. For example, at work, I have had a Tuesday be meeting days. So every time I had a meeting, I just scheduled it on Tuesday. I didn't have to think about it. I had blocks of time in the morning for deep work, blocks of time in the afternoon for shallow work, and then I would take my prioritized task list and I would plug it into the predetermined boxes. Emails would happen anytime within my shallow work time block. Household bills or repairs would happen in my administrative time box, and I could either paint my nails or straighten my hair in my self-care box. I'm interested in what types of ways you've used to manage your calendar or your event management system. Leave it in the comment section down below, and while you're down there, consider subscribing to this channel. I have 2 bonus tips for your event management system. As a spouse, I like to share some of my calendars with my spouse so that he's aware of some of the things that I'm aware of. I hate to just be the only one that knows when parent-teacher conferences are, so I want to share that calendar with him. I also really like having separate calendars, partially because I like to control the color schemes of my Google Calendar. And in order to do that completely, I need to have a separate calendar. But I also like the ability to turn calendars on and off so that I have a view of only what's going on at work when I'm at work, or I can turn off my work calendar and only see what I have going on in my personal life or in my business outside of work. I do like that ability to be able to do that. And from time to time, I also do some time tracking. If you're interested in how I do that, I'll leave a video up above. When I do that, I like to do it on a separate calendar that I can turn on and off so it doesn't clutter my actual calendar. So those are some tips as you're going through and developing your own system. Let's move on to the reference section. Maybe it's because I'm a complete nerd, or maybe it's my research background, but I love a good reference section. I separate all of my references based on my life domain. If you want to know more about life domains, I have videos on almost all of the portions of the tier system throughout my channel, so feel free to look around. Within my references section, I think about all of the different roles and responsibilities that I have in my life. So I'm a behavioral scientist, that's my primary job. I am also a professor and a clinician, so I have a private practice where I see a few clients every week. So that is 3 domains of my life that has to do with curriculum development and teaching. I have science and research, and I have my clinical work, my patients. So that's 3 different life areas. At home or in my personal life, I have to take care of myself. So that's health and wellness for myself. I'm a wife, mother, and dog owner. All of those go into my relationship reference. I also have a physical spaces domain. That's things like taking care of my house and my car, the physical things that require administrative work. I also have fun and leisure, things that I do as my hobbies, things like traveling, learning a second language, all of those things. I have overall about 10 life domains, and this isn't a totally new idea. It's consistent with complete life assessments. If you've seen this kind of life assessment wheel where it breaks your life down into 8 or 10 or 12 different areas, and people use it to rate themselves in those different areas of life. I complete a similar assessment on myself every year, but rather than using these generic domains, I like to walk through the exercise of figuring out my own life domains and then seeing where I am in all of those. This is relevant for my references because I want to keep references related to the specific things in my life within their own folder. Within my Notion life operating system, I have a space for physical spaces. And in there, I have receipts for home maintenance, receipts for my car, anything related to, let's say I get a quote for something, or my car insurance documentation. Everything is in that area. It's consistent with concepts like Tiago Forte's para method, a way of organizing and classifying information, so they're easy to access and grouped together in the event that you need to find something. So one of the things to consider in your references system is how you're going to classify and store information, how you're going to group and chunk them. That's also consistent with cognitive psychology literature, where it helps us to remember where things are based on how we group or chunk them. Some other features of more advanced reference systems is a consistent way of labeling your references. I always label my references starting with an 8-digit date code. It starts with the 4-digit year, then 2 digits for the month, and 2 digits for the day. That lets me sort things by date, and this is getting really in the weeds, but when you have certain programs, even things like Word or in Notion, where the date is changed every time you go into the document, so the date becomes the date that you edited the document, or you might have the date that you created the document and the date that you edited the document, but not necessarily the actual date that you want as your reference date. You just get the most personal control over the date associated with the document if you yourself put in the date that you want. If that was super confusing, put a question mark in the comment section down below. And if that was totally clear, leave a thumbs up because it's clear in my mind, but I want to make sure that it's clear for you as well. This last concept comes from a Harvard Business Review best practice, as well as some of Tiago Forte's work, and it's about labeling your references. As you're going through and labeling your references, consider how likely you are to need the reference in the future. The more likely you are to need the reference in the future, the more time it should take you to label that reference. If I know I'm going to need to find my dog's vaccination records once a year, I want to label it something that is really easy to remember, and I might take an extra minute or two to make sure that I'm optimizing the naming scheme. If there's something that I'm just unlikely to need to find later, I just want to have just in case, I might want to just decrease the amount of friction and just label it something convenient for me. And ideally, you are using descriptive labeling and the best labeling possible for everything, but it is a matter of balancing the amount of friction and time it takes for you to store something into your reference section and the likelihood that you'll need to find it in the future. So it's just an additional thing to think about as you're labeling your references. Finally, we're down to the system and how things move from one place to another within your task management system, your inbox, your event manager, and your references. We have talked about how things move from one place to another, but we haven't really solidified the tactical process of how we move things consistently. And that is the primary focus of this video right here, where I talk about my review and reset systems, which is how to effectively move things through your system in order to maximize life organization.